It is Friday, April 3rd. Let's talk PlayStation. Starting off, as always, with our PlayStation Plus reminder, the March games are not going to be available for that much longer because April 7th will go over to Uncharted 4 and Dirt Rally 2.0, much like Sony leaked by accident last week. These are the games we're getting, so if you haven't grabbed March's titles yet, you might want to do that soon. Now, I want to start off with this news story. We couldn't catch this on LTPS last week, but PS3 messaging will be severely limited come June 30th, where Sony is cutting off support of PS3 messaging to PS4 and Vita and vice versa. So essentially, from June 30th onward, if you're playing on PlayStation 3, you can only message other PS3 users, which is an interesting way for them to cut off PSN support slowly with PS3. Like, you can still play games online, the PS Store is still accessible, and those things will probably keep going on for a few years, assuming it warrants it. But yeah, that apparently is a PSN maintenance bottleneck there, and that has a cutoff date on PS3. So disappointing, but one of those harsh realities we will one day face with PS3. Now, we also have another major departure from Sony Interactive Entertainment. This one is Michael Denny, with the company for 25 years. He was the Senior Vice President of Sony Worldwide Studios Europe. It's been a growing theme lately where we have a lot of departures from SIE, which I know people immediately go to some sort of conspiracy theory or that Jim Ryan's messing everything up. But these are always senior guys that have been with the company for a very long time, and we always see a lot of departures around a console launch. It happened a lot with PlayStation 3. Now we're having it at the end of the PS4 life cycle. So much like Michael Denny leaving, Andrew House, Jack Tretton, Sean Layden, a lot of people just doing other things after being with the company for such a long time. Michael is going over to TT Games, the developer of the Lego franchise. So an odd, interesting change, but nonetheless, good luck to him. Now moving on to the Uncharted movie, it has been delayed again, although unsurprising. This isn't really an isolated scenario this time around. It's easy for us to crack jokes at this movie, but this, alongside many Sony films, were delayed in a recent roundup. Movies from other distributors are getting delayed. Games are getting delayed. We'll talk about that in a second. The entertainment sector as a whole, of course, getting hit pretty hard by the unforeseen circumstance of the coronavirus. So product launches that were planned for this year or early 2021 getting moved around. Uncharted movie is supposed to be coming out March 2021, now pushed to October 2021. So assuming that there's no roadblocks, hopefully we will see it then. Now on to games. That is the big one here. The Last of Us Part 2. Delayed indefinitely. It was supposed to come out May 29th. That is no longer the case because of the coronavirus. It is a logistics issue this time around. So we saw a lot of delays already with this game, and we were wondering, what's going on? Is there a problem? The game's almost done. They're just at that home stretch of bug fixing, QA, things like that. So thankfully the game was supposed to hit its targeted release date, but now we are in a scenario where the logistics of printing enough discs, getting them out to retailers is the real holdup here, which I'm seeing a lot of people say, well, why not release it digital? There's a problem with that in that you want to reach as many people as possible. This is a big game for Sony. They want people to be able to play it day one, no matter where their chosen purchase preference is. They don't want to mess with retailers. They obviously get a cut of that, but you shouldn't be encouraging people to go to retailers unless it's completely essential. You have people that want to own physical to sell later. You have countries that don't have great internet speeds. It's still very important for the availability of a big title like this. Also, people avoiding spoilers online. We know that Square Enix had a different approach where they still released it the day it was supposed to be released, but warned people you might not be able to get a physical copy because of the low volume of physical copies at retail. But as a business, I totally understand why Sony would want this game to be in a place where it can release and be uninterrupted by what we're dealing with right now, right? I mean, this is a big game. They want to move as many copies as possible. It's not really a wrong thing on Sony's end. And in fact, another game alongside that was delayed, but is kind of getting swept under the rug because it's not as big as The Last of Us, but Ironman VR, that was also delayed as well. So this is a title where we don't know when it will come out, but when Sony has an idea, they'll let us know. As a follow-up to both of these delays, Sony said that they have nothing else further to add. They're still evaluating the situation. So depending on what else gets delayed, we'll find out. Ghost of Tsushima, of course, is kind of a elephant in the room here, where that's slated for June. So if Last of Us was in May, and that's delayed indefinitely, where's Ghost of Tsushima going to go? That will be very interesting. I don't know how that game is going to keep its release date, because you don't want to, once again, put it right next to The Last of Us, which it was already pretty close as is. So obviously Sony doesn't have a problem with it being pretty close together. But, if The Last of Us isn't going to come out in June, then Ghosts has to get pushed back, right? Something has to get shuffled around here. So there's that's still left up in the air. And while we were just mentioning the Final Fantasy VII Remake, that is also just kind of a PSA right here, but The game broke its release date a little bit early, so copies are out there. People are playing it. So kind of weird to say no spoilers, but keep in mind, look out for spoilers. Anything that's extra to the game or scenes that you don't want to see until you see it yourself when you're playing the game, things like that. Just be careful online because copies are floating around out there now. But the trophy list is also out, so either go ahead and look for these things or avoid it until you can get your hand on the game for yourself. But anyway, going back to the virus situation, what Sony is currently doing, all employees are staying at home until April 30th. They're guaranteed their pay. Some employees, even those at Worldwide Studios, are being given $1,000 to work from home, whether they need that money for equipment or they could just go use it for personal use, I'd imagine. But more or less, they're taking care of their employees. Even contractors are still getting paid. So whether they can or can't work from home, not only are they doing that, but they will continue to be paid. Sony Corp as a whole is starting a $100 million relief fund. So for the medical field, things like that, they're just doing their goodwill as a company. That's always great to see. Any major company like Sony, for example, I mean, they are sitting on a massive amount of cash, so it's always nice to see that they will release it when it is duly needed for the good of society. I like seeing that from any big multi-billion-dollar company, right, when they actually try to give a little bit back. But with this issue still looming and what will be looming for quite a while, games getting delayed, movies getting delayed, delays everywhere, everybody keeps asking, what about PlayStation 5? What about Series X? Will these consoles release holiday 2020 as planned? Now, as far as we're being told, both companies are claiming that they will release holiday 2020. No changes there. They're probably doing a wait-and-see approach. I think it's cool that they keep saying holiday 2020, but that's all we can really go on, and that's, to be fair, that's all they can go on as well. China is getting there. They're slowly recovering, but it still remains to be seen if manufacturing can be up to 100% by the time these consoles need to start getting manufactured. And then there's society as a whole from all these different countries that are going to see this product actually launch there. Will it even be suitable for you to go to a store and pick up a PlayStation 5? Will we be there at that point? Holiday 2020 is still very far away, but keep in mind the whole issue regarding this virus is that there is no vaccine. It's highly infectious. You don't know if you have it. You can spread it without knowing you have it. It has a pretty high fatality rate. The numbers keep going up and up and up. It's a very real situation, but I think both companies just don't really know what to say other than it's far out enough for them to say it's still coming holiday 2020 without having to say they're delayed, because as of right now, they don't really have to say it's delayed because it's just so far out. So that's really the approach that they're more than likely taking right now, and they probably still will hit that release, their release windows, but we'll have to wait and see. Nobody has an answer. The only thing we can say for certain is that the way we've been getting our PS5 news probably isn't going to change all that much. Gamescom, a recent example, large gaming convention every single year, high attendance rate. We sometimes get press conferences, a lot of news out of there. They have announced that while they're not necessarily canceling the event, they'll make a decision mid-May if they need to, but whether they do or don't, they will hold a large online presence. That's probably going to be a bunch of live streams, conference calls for what would have been business meetings, the same ways that a lot of other outlets have been trying to skirt around this issue, which is good foreshadowing to basically just, keep in mind this is what we're going to be dealing with for months, right? So, I know we've been talking about and wishing for a while that we'd get a PS5 Reveal Event, right, where it's a 2-hour-long conference, you've got a bunch of people in an auditorium, you've got hands-on and interviews after the fact. I mean, that really can't and won't take place now. I mean, we have a huge brand new console launch between Sony and Microsoft, and they can't really do things like that. So at this point, expect another, weird video like the PS5 Tech Dive where, there's not going to be applauses or anything like that, right? Keep it like this is what it's going to be, right? We're going to get state of plays now, assuming that's what they'll do. They'll probably have some sort of makeshift hour-long live stream that they'll do, right? But it's not going to have the same feel and energy of the reveal events that we kept talking about, right? It won't be in the same veins of what Sony did in 2013 or what Microsoft did. It's just not really going to be that way. So for something as important as a console launch, it is disappointing, especially that, we'll probably get plenty of interviews and things like that, but like hands-on is going to be like a pretty big problem. we'd have to see. I don't know how they're going to do that in terms of trying to make sure that people have playtime on these new platforms. Of course, they can send machines out like a few months before release, but even further back from that, you still have to have situations where people play a PS5 game and put up a preview, or same with Series X. It's just the usual rollout, right? It's the usual press rollout. This is going to look much different this time around. Next up, is the PlayStation 5 in trouble? Cooling issues, developers unhappy, underestimating Microsoft, bunch of kind of ridiculous claims. I wasn't going to cover this, but then sure enough, a few websites published this as a news story, and then people asked me to cover this and what I thought about it. So let's dispel most of this. This started with a tweet from Daniel Rubino, the executive editor at Windows Central, who posted a screenshot of a YouTube comment from Jeff Rickle. Kind of a long-winded thing. We're not going to read all this, but basically making a bunch of claims that Sony messed up big time this generation. They underestimated Microsoft and were overconfident. They expect delays to the PS5 because of overheating problems like the Xbox 360. Sony's really concerned right now. The underlying issue is Sony didn't realize the form factor would need to be changed of the console to look more like the Series X tower, which would look like they just copied Microsoft. They claimed, why have we not seen launch titles? The reason is developers don't know what to optimize for because Sony doesn't know what PS5's performance will look like. They say it's really bad. Developers think it's really bad. Sony's hoping the PS name will just carry them through this. We've been warned. Sony rested on their laurels and took for granted what was going on. The debate internally is, do they delay it by 6 to 12 months to get it right, or do they keep pace with Microsoft and release the system with a high failure rate and performance issues? Jez Corden, who is an editor from Windows Central, has also apparently heard things regarding this as well. And Daniel Rubino says that, yes, he's known to us. Apparently, he can be trusted. So the problem with these claims, before we even dive further, is that nobody would really have very reliable access to that kind of information, like the console design, heat problems, the performance of the platform. I mean, developers are often actually left completely in the dark regarding these things. And even though this person claims, oh, they know somebody at Sony as well, that kind of information is just... You're very hard pressed to get that kind of stuff to leak out. Sometimes it's close. Sometimes, we've had leaks in the past over console generations which were pretty accurate and they were very far out. We've covered that before, but this is the kind of stuff that is very hard to get out. So just on that merit alone, it doesn't sound very believable whatsoever, especially given that this is the first time we've heard it. But Jason Schreier actually chimed in and dived through this guy's 3-year-old tweets and found scenarios where, he kind of just does the console fanboy stuff, right? Talking about downplaying PlayStation 4 success by stating that Xbox One had a higher rate of user engagement. There's long been rumors of developers unhappy with PS4 because they feel more games should be sold to a large amount of consoles, claiming that PlayStation is done with when Scorpio comes. That's Xbox One X, which is also kind of a dumb thing to say because it's a low volume machine. PS4 Pro wasn't gonna take the world by storm, neither was One X. They're low volume machines. They sell 1 in 5 consoles, 1 in 4, 1 in 3, best case scenario. I don't know why people keep citing One X or PS4 Pro as high volume machines. They're not. They're low volume. He says Sony's out of money. My dad worked for them. Situation inside company's dire. They may sell PS assets sooner than you think. That's just laughable. This already tells me this person knows pretty much nothing about anything, you'd imagine. PlayStation is Sony's breadwinner, Sony Corp's breadwinner. I mean, they wouldn't sell PlayStation. They wouldn't sell any PlayStation assets. That's the corporation's breadwinner right there. And he keeps citing PS4 customers are less engaged. They buy less add-ons and buy fewer games. Sony's concerned the console is just an impulse buy. This is just one of those things where it so clearly illustrates somebody that tries to push a narrative. And these are the kind of things that I really hate covering because this happens all the time, a lot. And I think the reason why this one caught attention, well, not much, but a little bit of attention, is because some of the guys from Windows Central covered this. Now, they have a high amount of Twitter followers. It's a website that has a lot of traffic. So, when these guys talk about something, even when they try to appear as though they don't believe it initially, which in Daniel Rubino's credit, he says, does anybody believe this? But that's the kind of situation where this kind of stuff gets out and gets circled around a little bit, and it becomes a genuine concern for some people. But it seems quite clear to me that this person is talking out of their ass. And I would hope most of you realize by now that this isn't me doing damage control as a PlayStation channel. Like, that's the only thing I really regret doing strictly a PlayStation channel, is that, you know, it's easy to slip into that weird fanboy nonsense, which I really try hard to distance myself away from that stuff, and that's why I like to avoid news stories like these. But I often try to take this moment to plead that, like, you know, don't get involved in this kind of stuff. Not even from the Xbox side. PlayStation fans are just as guilty of doing this stuff for it. And I refer to it as just weird. I just find it flat out weird. Like, inherently, there's nothing wrong with having a preference platform, right? I mean, that's why I started this channel. That's why many of us enjoy PlayStation. Many people really only need one platform. There's nothing wrong with that inherently, to buy one machine and primarily play on that. That's most people's habits. It's perfectly normal. But as a fan of games, I just find it weird that you would want one platform to do bad. You would want a game to come out and not be received well. You would want people that worked on that game to be laid off in regards to that. You would want a whole manufacturer to go under. You want people to not be happy with the games that they're playing. Like, aren't you a fan of video games too? Don't you want to play great games? That's what's so weird to me. Now, I make sure I have every platform available so that no matter where a good game is, I'm able to play it. That's a luxury that I thoroughly enjoy. Not many people can do that, but I just find it so bizarre that people get that emotionally attached to a console, that you have situations like these. And to be fair, this is pretty much what this whole scenario falls under. Now, if anything in there is true, then hey, by all means, the guy actually went out of his way to release some very crucial information, and Sony slips back into the PS3 days. But I'm going to venture a guess and say that this is all complete nonsense. Moving on, this past week we did get some very minor new details about PlayStation 5, or really more technical aspects of the platform that we know a little bit more about. Digital Foundry finally released their follow-up video where they got to talk to Mark Cerny prior to the PS5 deep dive, so they finally released that discussion. Well, really, it was just Richard talking to the camera explaining what he had talked about with Mark Cerny. So we got some more very minor details about the CPU and GPU. What Richard had said is that more than one developer told Digital Foundry that they are throttling the CPU performance to max out the GPU to consistently get that 2.23 gigahertz. And that kind of is more in line with CPU-GPU profiles that we see on the Nintendo Switch today. But when Richard asked about that, Mark Cerny responded saying that this is only the case on PS5 dev kits. So when utilizing AMD Smart Shift, that's when, you know, CPU and GPU power is getting thrown around to each other when the situation needs it. This is when the retail hardware is going to tap into the variable clocks for that extra performance. And Mark Cerny does reiterate from when he was asked from Richard that PS5 will very much most of the time operate in these boost clocks at the very top tier performance. It's completely opposite to what we normally see boost clocks anywhere else on PCs, smartphones, tablets. It's complete opposite. People are still getting this mixed up. So remember, PS5 uses a set power limit, and it's tied directly to the thermal dissipation. So that's the real ceiling, the real roof there. The CPU, GPU can move to that as needed. Of course, when it comes to the power draw, most of the set power draw is going to the GPU. And since a lot of games, and this is interesting actually, and it's totally right on, but since these current generation consoles had, you know, a weaker CPU, not the best CPU, a lot of games have been developed around that aspect, right, where they're accounting for the CPU bottleneck. So moving forward, a lot of third parties, since they are still releasing games on the outgoing platforms, Xbox One and PlayStation 4, this will be a situation where early on, a lot of PlayStation 5 games are absolutely going to hit the top of the GPU, much like Mark is stating, but also the CPU is going to have a lot of overhead because, well, it's just so much more than what we've had previously on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. For another piece of minor news, we also learned that Sony Japan Studio has opened an external development department, which we don't entirely know what that means, although I'd imagine it is just them separating internal development from, well, just that, their external work that they do. They do a lot of external work. They work with a lot of other developers. I mean, Japan Studio is one of those wild cards for Sony where we see a lot of just completely random, out of left field projects. I mean, they have a lot of IPs under their belt, but they're not really all that similar. They're a little quirky, a little different, a little out there. There's VR projects now. They are doing a lot of VR stuff, but they'll work with other developers to pump out some projects as well. I mean, they do a lot of you know, you never really know what you're going to get out of Japan Studio. So I'd imagine the external development department will be a lot of this more collaborative work that they do with other teams, other publishers, and try to release, again, potentially smaller scale projects, but games that are not necessarily completely developed in-house from Sony. Now let's move on to Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I'd like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter. If you would like to win a $10 code, very simple, follow the link down below. Supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week. I am trying to pay for your games. Those are all the news stories that I want to talk about with you all. On Tuesday, we did some PS4 accessories from Wish.com, a very quirky website where you get a lot of handmade stuff, a lot of more unique products, and so I thought, what PS4 accessories are over there? Go check that out. This coming Tuesday, we are back to the usual routine where I don't know what I'm going to upload on Tuesday, but be there on Tuesday. You'll find out what it is. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.